Bé, bona tarda a tothom i benvinguts. Good evening to everyone and to Mattijs van der Poort as well. How are you, Mattijs?
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, although we would have loved to have you here in Barcelona, of course, but I hope that we will be able to do it in a not too distant future. You will be always very welcome here.
That's good to know. I'll
So
show up one day. You can count on that.
Great, that's great. So we will use both Catalan and English during the presentation. So bé, bona tarda a tothom, com deia. Comencem la segona sessió d'aquest cicle de cinema etnogràfic coordinat entre l'Institut Català d'Antropologia i l'IVAC. L'IVAC és el grup de treball sobre cinema, antropologia i cultura visual. Aquesta mostra de cinema etnogràfic es fa en el marc de la Mostra Internacional de Cinema Etnogràfic de l'Observatori del Patrimoni Etnològic i Material. Vam fer una primera sessió fa 15 dies, avui fem la segona sessió i en aquesta segona sessió, doncs, vaja, jo estic molt content perquè feia molt de temps que tenia ganes d'organitzar una sessió sobre el cinema de Mattijs van der Poort, que és un dels antropòlegs visuals, després ho explicarem una mica més de detalls, contemporanis, doncs, que està fent propostes més interessants i, vaja, molt apassionat i realment que forma part d'aquest grup d'antropòlegs que fan cinema, que pensen en la imatge, que busquen noves formes d'expressió i de comunicació a través de la imatge dins de l'àmbit del cinema i, per tant, em fa molta il·lusió poder presentar una pel·lícula del Mattijs aquí i, a més, poder fer-ho també en subtítols en català. I was saying that today is the second session of this short film festival that we are organizing with the Catalan Institute of Anthropology and our group of research, which is a group on cinema anthropology and visual culture. And that I am very glad to screen your film today with Catalan subtitles, to present it to this Catalan audience. And that, of course, we are all looking forward to have you here personally in the future. So what we are going to do now is this festival has been organized by myself and Josep. So now Josep is going to say a few words, and then Mattijs, you will have the chance to say a few words before the screening of your long film and the short one. So now it's a turn for Josep, and then you'll have some time to say a few words before the screening if you wish.
Sure.
Josep.
Val, jo vull fer un comentari molt breu. Només aprofito l'oportunitat per donar les gràcies una altra vegada a l'ICA, al Roger Canals, a l'IVAC, al Mattijs per ser aquí i per poder muntar aquesta sessió. No vull dir pràcticament res de les pel·lícules perquè penso que no animaria a veure, crec que perdria gràcia, però sí que un breu comentari. Jo crec que el cine etnogràfic es diferencia d'altres formes de cinema en tant que contextualitza les imatges i ho fa d'una forma reflexiva, en un constant diàleg de qui filma i qui és filmat. El cinema etnogràfic mostra el caràcter relacional de les imatges. Només dir una cosa de la pel·lícula Knots and Holes. Knots and Holes és una pel·lícula ambientada en zones portuàries brasilenyes que parla sobre xarxes. Dic només això. Ja ho dic, potser ja he dit massa i em sap greu, però parla sobre xarxes per anar pescant. I per enllaçar una mica amb el que deia la darrera sessió, on vaig parlar sobre la cara humana com l'àtom del llenguatge fílmic, en tant que és l'element que permet a l'espectador identificar-se fugaçment amb unes experiències alienes que, en el cas del cine etnogràfic, es refereixen, o sigui, són referencials a qüestions i conflictes reals. Avui ens trobem amb una mena de cine posthumanista, on els protagonistes no són cares, sinó que són objectes materials. I clar, que aquí avui veiem com a través dels objectes materials que cobren vida gràcies a la mirada de la càmera que els anima, i els anima en el sentit profund d'animar, els dota d'una ànima pròpia, que podem entendre les relacions humanes. I per fer-ho, quin objecte pot ser més oportú que les xarxes? I amb això no dic res més i gràcies.
Bé, faig una petita presentació. Mattijs van der Poort és un antropòleg visual de la Universitat d'Amsterdam. Ha fet investigacions a Sèrbia, a Holanda també, i des del 2001 al Brasil. És autor de 3 llibres i de diverses pel·lícules entre les quals pel·lícules més assagístiques com The Possibility of Spirits i aquesta Knots and Holes, que ha estat seleccionada en molts festivals de cinema etnogràfic. Ara està acabant un altre film que formaria part d'aquesta mena de trilogia de Bahia que es titularà The Body Won't Close i que serà tota una reflexió sobre certes pràctiques de caràcter religiós i màgic també al Brasil. Dit això, i abans de començar la projecció, deixo la paraula a Mattijs per si vol dir alguna cosa a tall d'introducció, que jo després traduiré per tots vosaltres. Mattijs, if you want to say a few words before the screening of Knots and Holes, please.
Yes, and it's nice. I can pretty much understand Catalan. This is a big surprise for me. A nice surprise, actually.
Great, that you are one among us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to screen Knots and Holes. I think that the film should speak for itself, but I think it's probably interesting to know that it sort of followed. I made a previous film called The Possibility of Spirits, and that sort of got into all kinds of ethnographic film festivals because I'm really late as a filmmaker. I only make films the last 8 years, I think. So for me, the first film brought me to all these film festivals, and then I watched a lot of ethnographic films, and usually I was very impressed with what I saw. But I was also a bit, at some point, discontented, if you want, because intellectually I felt, for me, ethnography is always part of a larger discipline, anthropology, and anthropology is very much, for me, an intellectual endeavor to think through larger issues, theoretical issues, big questions. And I felt that many ethnographic films don't go there. They don't do theory, if you want. These films are being theorized, but they do not perform theory themselves. And then people started telling me, no, but that's logical because you cannot do theory in a film. And that sort of, when people start to say that, I think, well, what happens if one tries? And basically, this is what I did with Knots and Holes. So it's basically, it started out as a project really to see what becomes of theory when you do theory in a film. And the whole idea to focus on the figure of the net was indeed informed by this idea, okay, here we have an object, but which is also a concept, which is figuring in anthropological theory a lot. You have network theory and what have you. So what happens if I make a film about nets? And I think what happens is what we're going to see. And then afterwards, I would love to get comments and feedback and critiques and whatever comes.
That's great. Thank you very much for these words, which point directly to the heart of the possibility of the visual within anthropology, the potentiality of it, and I would even say more the specificity of the visual what image and the visual endeavor can provide to the anthropology as a broader discipline, not only to reflect, to represent, to confirm what we already know, but to provide some kind of specific knowledge within the broad endeavor. Tradueixo molt ràpidament el que ha dit el Mattijs. Diu que fa tot just 8 anys que es va iniciar en el camp del cinema etnogràfic amb aquesta pel·lícula, The Possibility of Spirits. Aquesta pel·lícula li va permetre començar a freqüentar els cercles del cinema etnogràfic, anar a molts festivals de cinema etnogràfic, i allà va tenir un doble sentiment de fascinació d'una banda i d'un cert desconcert o decepció per altra a l'adonar-se que moltes pel·lícules de cinema etnogràfic no contenien una reflexió teòrica, i l'antropologia és una disciplina teòrica que es planteja qüestions importants en relació al fet social, i li van dir, no, és que clar, no pots fer teoria si fas cinema. I ell va preguntar, realment això és així? Puc fer teoria tot fent cinema? I la pel·lícula que ara ens mostrarà és un intent de donar resposta a aquesta pregunta, a aquest repte. És el que he intentat en aquesta pel·lícula. Llavors, diu, aquí en aquesta pel·lícula es fixa en la xarxa, net. Net és xarxa, en català. Xarxa en la xarxa, que és, podríem dir, un objecte-concepte, perquè hi ha, evidentment, la xarxa és un objecte, la xarxa per pescar, però també en l'antropologia, en les ciències socials, no deixem de parlar d'aquesta idea de la xarxa social, de la teoria del lector-xarxa, lector-red. Per tant, a través d'aquest objecte podia, diguéssim, abordar aquesta qüestió del lloc que ocupa o que podria ocupar la teoria en un cinema etnogràfic. Dit això, passem doncs a la projecció de la pel·lícula Knots and Holes. Thank you very much, Mattijs. We are going to see your film, and then afterwards we will open the floor for comments, and then we have a kind of dessert with your short film VENTO that I have never seen. So I'm looking forward to see this film too.
Great.
So anem a projectar la pel·lícula, no cal que abandoneu la sessió perquè farem un compartir pantalla i d'aquesta forma mantenim aquesta idea de comunitat fílmica.
Vale.
I tu també, i passem la paraula a la gent. I was saying that we're gonna discuss a little bit about this film, and then we are going to watch your short film, VENTO, of 4 minutes at the end of the session as a kind of a final gift for the audience. Normalment jo dic diem sempre que un cinema de recerca és també una recerca sobre el cinema, no? És a dir, que un cinema que pretén a través del cinema entendre, explorar el món, crear relacions sobre aquest món, implica també una reflexió sobre els límits i les potencialitats del cinema mateix. Jo crec que en el cas de la pel·lícula que acabem de veure, aquesta afirmació és portada al seu límit, perquè aquest cinema de recerca no només és una recerca sobre el cinema mateix, sinó una recerca al cap i a la fi sobre l'antropologia i també sobre l'estatus de la teoria. És interessant en aquest sentit plantejar-se algunes de les preguntes que situa aquesta pel·lícula, a través d'aquest muntatge en què es van filant com en una xarxa diferents seqüències, diferents veus, diferents personatges. El món és ordenat com una xarxa, com semblen suggerir les escates del peix, on nosaltres l'ordenem i en certa forma el capturem a l'imposar-li una teoria extreta que ve de fora i que en certa forma violenta un món no ordenat. L'ordre és inherent en el món o és allò que nosaltres imposem en el món per tal d'entendre'l? I aquí també ve un tema molt interessant, jo penso, a la pel·lícula, no? La xarxa, com la teoria, és allò que et permet captar, agafar, comprendre, però al mateix temps la xarxa pot acabar atrapada en la seva pròpia naturalesa, com la teoria que al final només es pensa a si mateixa. No sé si m'explico. Jo penso que totes aquestes idees apareixen en la pel·lícula, no? O almenys són suggerides a la pel·lícula a través d'aquest llenguatge assaig. I aquí jo faré una primera pregunta al Mattijs, després, Josep, tu fas alguna suggerència, si vols, o qualsevol persona de l'audiència, si ho voleu fer en català, jo o qualsevol altra persona ho pot traduir. És primer sobre l'estatus de l'assaig, perquè el Mattijs defineix la pel·lícula com un assaig. Jo voldria que digués una mica què és aquesta idea de l'assaig, la relació de la teoria amb el debat clàssic entre la imatge i el text, si es pot fer, i l'estatus del muntatge en aquest sentit, i finalment el risc de que la xarxa, com la teoria, acabi atrapada en si mateixa. Mattijs, I was saying, well, that's a fascinating film, a very thought-provoking film that I think that has been rather groundbreaking within the visual anthropologist community. And I was implies a research on the cinema, on the possibilities and potentialities of cinema, and that your film tackles these questions very strongly, and also poses the question of the possibilities of anthropology in itself and knowledge making, and it fosters us to think on the idea of there is an order out there, or do we impose an order when we try to understand it? And and there comes the idea of the net as a trap. Is the net, because there's a risk as well in nets. I mean, the net can be entrapped in itself as the theory that we need theory to understand the world, that perhaps when we do theory, and we cannot do without it, we are somehow redefining theory, a theory just thinking on itself, on the status of theory, and how can we escape from it? Perhaps cinema is a possibility, as you say, a promise, because you can't get rid of the ethnographic encounter in cinema. And that is something that we always say as visual anthropologists, teachers, you and me, and some of our friends, that when you make a film, when you edit a film, you have pieces of encounters, you have bodies, you have places, you have colors, and you can't get rid of them as you do in language. But in your film, language is very important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And here comes the classic debate on the status of the text vis-a-vis the image, and the idea that I think that you reject, that theory is only possible when you use text and when you collide, when you put a text on images. That the image would be a kind of monstration, and you show with images, but you explain through text. I think that your film does not follow this path, which is a very classic one, but you use text in a very provocative way. So these are just some general thoughts. I have plenty of them, but just to give you concrete questions to begin with. First image, you present your film as an essay film. What is an essay for you? That would be the first point.
Okay.
Why an essay? And then the premise of theory. Well, what would be a cinematic theory, a visual theory? Can you make a visual theory without text?
Mm.
And then it is a film about the notion of risk, although it is not set in the film. I think that the idea of risk is there, and I would like you to comment on this if you agree or not, because there is always the possibility, the risk that the theory, the anthropologist discipline entraps itself as a kind of reflexive trap, and that we cannot get rid of ourselves, of our own concepts. And perhaps the best way to escape from it is to be honest, as you are in the film, to show yourself, to say, okay, that's the rules of the game. Well,
that's a lot of thank you so much for all the Roger, for all the comments and the very pertinent questions. Yes, so the maybe I can start with the question about the essay, because that for me it was for a long time the history of my filmmaking was a bit. I was a writing anthropologist. But I always had I had trouble with social science writing, exactly because it always sort of is I feel it's obsessed with ordering the world, and when everything is neatly ordered, then we can say, oh, now we understand things. But I had been doing research in Serbia during the war, and there was no order where I was. There was a mess, and I always felt that the social science text could not accommodate the messiness of the world. So my move to filmmaking was to a medium which was far more hospitable to the messiness of the world, if you want. So primarily, I was very intrigued by the work of the Harvard Ethnography Lab. I'm sure many people of you know this work, which are very radical in sort of wanting to delinguify film and saying, let's kick out language because now we have a sensorial engagement with the world. We don't, if you want to tell a story, you can write a book, but we make films and we don't need the word. And for my frustration with the word was such that for a while I was totally sort of very enthusiastic about this radical proposition, but increasingly I became troubled by it as well, because I felt that, especially when I do films on Afro-Brazilian religion, a lot of images, if I just send them in the world as an experience and do not step in as an anthropologist to question what it is that I'm doing, sending around these images, I think that would be very irresponsible, because they reproduce all kinds of ideas about Black people having primitive rituals and what have you. So I felt I cannot become the artist who says, here you have beautiful images, you have a nice experience, and you interpret it any way you want. I think anthropology has a responsibility to say that not every interpretation is adequate. And I was really struggling, what can I do? And then I discovered the genre of the essay film, which sort of saved me, if you want. Because on the one hand, the essay film really reintroduces language in a very obvious way, but it is a very particular kind of language, and it is exactly not the language which sort of colonizes the image by saying what these images are. But I was very much inspired by the Vietnamese visual anthropologist Tri Minh Ha, when she said, look, my words don't speak about the images, they speak nearby them. And that is so beautiful, to think of words that do not speak about the images, but speak nearby them, because then the relationship between the words and the image and the sound and the silence and all these other dimensions of film is not predefined. It's like a neighborly relation, and it creates a space for the viewer to say, okay, I hear you say this, but I see that. And I can probably understand why you're saying this in the co-presence of that image, but I need not necessarily go with you in your interpretation. I'm talking much too much, because if you want to translate, you probably, I'm going to, or can I just, should I stop?
Well, I'm gonna translate it very briefly. Imagino que hi ha algunes persones per qui és millor que tradueixi, aniré molt ràpid. Mattijs ha vingut a dir que ell sobretot era un antropòleg escriptor que escrivia llibres i que al principi estava, com tants de nosaltres, obsessionat per aquesta idea de l'ordre, de trobar l'ordre en el món, però ja el seu primer treball a Sèrbia va veure que allò era un desordre, precisament, que era una realitat que no tenia l'ordre i que el text difícilment podia representar aquesta absència d'ordre, aquesta manca d'ordre. I allà és on el tema de la visualitat li va semblar interessant. En un primer moment es va acostar a tota una escola, que és l'escola de Harvard, que és el Sensory Lab, el laboratori sensorial de Harvard, que critiquen la teoria, que volen completament rebutjar el llenguatge, i en un primer moment es va sentir fascinat per aquesta escola, però també després va ser crític amb aquesta escola, per aquest refús de l'ordre, perquè en el cap i a la fi l'antropologia té aquesta promesa per entendre, no? per mostrar alguna cosa més. I allà és on va, diguéssim, entrar en contacte amb aquesta categoria d'assaig, que era la pregunta que jo inicialment li feia. Una categoria d'assaig que reintrodueix el llenguatge dins del projecte del cinema i de l'antropologia, però un llenguatge que és particular, un llenguatge que no pretén explicar les imatges, sinó, seguint les paraules de Tri Minh Ha, un llenguatge que no és sobre les imatges, però que s'apropa a les imatges, que s'acosta a les imatges. I això mostra que la relació entre llenguatge i imatge no és una relació predeterminada, sinó és una relació molt més suggestiva, que el propi espectador pot dir, d'acord, aquest llenguatge i aquesta imatge sí o no, jo no estic d'acord amb aquest llenguatge i amb aquesta imatge. La deixa oberta.
Right. Thanks for the translation. And,
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do my best.
Yeah. Well, from what I can follow, you do a great job. So, and then you asked me, what do I take an essay to be, and how does that relate to the whole idea of theory?
Yeah, I think that you responded to the second question, which is the relationship between, the possibility of a visual theory.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the great joys for me to work with film, basically now I tell my students, basically, in film, I found a new environment for my thoughts. And where previously I would put my thoughts on silent white paper, which is a passive recipient of whatever I think. Now my thoughts land in a very dynamic environment of sounds, of silences, of other people's voices, of images, which speak back. There's always a tension between what I'm arguing and what is more in the image. And this is so every image has like a surplus, an immense surplus of possible meanings. And so you can always hear me try to impose my, or bring my argument to that image. But there's always a lot of stuff present in the image that allows a viewer to have an alternative reading, to associate in a different direction. And that's so what I wanted for my thinking. I want to think in an environment which speaks back, which questions, which complicates, which brings in nuances, which even goes against whatever it is that I'm trying to say. And I really feel that cinema, the filmic medium, with all these layers that it introduces, is in a far more interesting environment to think than my silent white paper.
I cannot be more agree with you with all this. And let me just translate it, and then it will be Josep's turn, and then Elisenda Ardèvol, one of our dear friends, wants to ask you something too. Deixeu-me dir només que ell ha dit que en el cinema ha trobat un nou entorn pel seu pensament, un entorn que no es restringeix al que li permetia el text escrit, un entorn que és fet d'imatges, evidentment, però també de sons, de veus, d'altres veus, d'una multitud de persones, i en què cada imatge esdevé un horitzó de possibilitats. Cada imatge pot ser connectada amb altres de maneres molt diferents. I aquest és un entorn que pel seu pensament és un entorn dinàmic, és un entorn molt potencial que li ofereix tot diguéssim, unes possibilitats a l'hora de pensar i de fer la seva antropologia que no ofereixen el registre del text escrit tal i com ell el concebia anteriorment. So now I will give the voice to Josep, also one of the coordinators of this festival too, of course.
Yes, please.
Jo tenia preparat un parell de comentaris, però crec que deixaré la paraula a l'Elisenda, que digui ella el que digui. Si després dona temps ja comentaré jo alguna cosa i que parli l'Elisenda.
Com vulguis. So now it's Elisenda Ardèvol. Josep, if we have time, he will send you his comments later. Elisenda Ardèvol.
Esperem que sí, perquè tenia... Em sentiu?
Sí, et sentim, Elisenda. Si vols presentar-te tu també i endavant.
Hola. Hi, Mattijs.
Hi, Elisenda. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. I didn't know if I can express myself quite well in English because it's a long time I didn't practice it, but I will try. Or here is Roger to help me anyway.
Right.
Yeah, first of all, I enjoy your film very much. I think that it's a great attempt to think reflexively, about cinema, anthropology, ethnography, and film, and how to convey knowledge using all these different kinds of languages, because I think that film it's a kind of language, as our words, it's other ways of thinking. We think on images, and we think also with words, and sometimes words are images. So I didn't believe that there is a clear ontological difference between image and word, because word is an image, is a sound image, It's more symbolic maybe, but a word can also be very indexical,
Right.
And the same with images, images that are indexical and images that are very symbolic. So I think that images and words are languages, that we use. I don't know, but I think that you in your film, you were thinking with images and words, and with the world. You interrogate, you ask, you question constantly the world, the planet itself as a character in your film. You interpellas algo, you speak to the with him, or with it, somehow.
Yeah.
And I like it very much, this dialogue you keep with the world, but also here it's one part of my question, that is one part of my reflection is that you dialoguing with the world, you think the world as the other, I mean, there is the humans and the way that humans look at the world, and there is the world. And it's a very Kant perspective, of Kant. Like this world, we can never know. It's an inconnu, and in this sense, is the very very classic metaphor of theory is the net, and the net of this positivistic way of thinking that you understand. You cannot understand the world because the world is different from humans, and you only have your tools that are poor, always so poor to grasp the mess of the world, and it's meaningless. So on the one hand, I question, what do you think about these new conceptions of ontological turn that see that the world and the humans are not divided, are not separate, but are part of the same milieu? So it's not so. I mean, our thoughts are part of nature, are not something different. Our thoughts are part of the world too, and in that sense, the net is part of the universe too, as it's part of our way of being human. We use the net as a tool or as a trap, but the net it's also there. I mean, it's part of us. I don't know. My question will be around that. How do you think about this question, ontological question between epistemology and ontology and the world and you and the humans? How we relate each other in this quest for knowing, for quest for knowledge. And I also was thinking about thinking through images, in ethnographic film, and this old debate. I am a very old person, and sometimes I think that I'm having in visual anthropology and ethnographic film, we always bring again the same kind of problems that I thought that they were solved a long time ago. But they come and come again, and our students ask about them. What is first, image of word, And we can think through film. Yes, you can. I mean, you are seeing a lot of films every day, and you make meaning of them, and they have a lot of theories inside them. For example, one example is Kubrick, is 201, an Odyssey, and Space Odyssey. This is a theoretical film from the beginning to the end. It's a very anthropological film. It stands up a great, strong theory about what humans are, and what we can become. So I think that is a false dilemma that we cannot think with images, and we cannot elaborate a discourse. So images. Another example for me, that I was a student. When I was a student, my supervisor, you have to see the film of Robert Gardner, Forest of Bliss, which is Forest of Bliss is without words, and the words that appear are in Hindu. I mean, it's no translation, no translation at all, and in the speaker, it's uncomfortable. And so I was looking at that film, and a strong anthropological thesis were there. And I was making sense of that anthropological theories that were inscribed in the way that the images were selected, the montage, everything. And it was a strong position of the director about what is the Hindu people and their beliefs about society, about death, about the natural, etc., etc. So I was astonished that I can understand that film without a word, just because the montage was very, very well done, I think, and very poetical too, as yours. But I think that poetic, it's a very interesting tool for ethnographic filmmakers. So I think that it's not the dilemma, but the question is, how do we do that? And this is my last question, excuse me. But my last question is, how do you do that? I mean, how do you were producing that film? The process of doing it, what comes first, and while you were filming, you were thinking about theory and your metaphors of theory and so on, or it was a second stage after the film that you organized the images that way, and how it was the process? Thanks a lot. I enjoyed the film very much.
Thank you, Elisenda, for your comments. Maybe just briefly, I couldn't agree more that you can speak with images, you can speak with words, and so in my previous answer, I probably made a big contrast, as if here's what film can accomplish, and here's what words can accomplish. I think I should be more specific. My problem was very much with social science writing, which I think poetic writing opens up language in ways that are very similar how images work. So especially there, I couldn't agree more with you that I think one should not sort of make the contrast too big as to what images can accomplish and what words can accomplish. One should rather think about what kind of language we want to use, and I'm with you that I think the poetic language has great potential for anthropology, and in my own work, I'm basically interested in the tensions that you can sort of produce and find in the co-presence of words, language, and images, sounds, silences. That is basically a field that I'm still very much exploring. Then you had a question about the ontological turn, which I always find a bit difficult to go into. I agree with, but interestingly, the way you phrased it, the film that I'm now finishing, the new film, very much is about this idea that it's about the human body, and it very much has this fundamental idea that we like to think of the body as this sort of closed entity that is in the world, but the film basically says, no, the body is of the world. That boundary that we imagine is in fact not there. We're breathing every second, we're totally porous. So there I'm really developing this idea. You cannot sort of isolate the body entity as sort of a autonomous unit in the world. No, it is part and parcel of the world. And I take you that I should, you can ask that question for the nets, for instance. Are they that which we throw over the world, or are they part of the world? And theoretically, I'm totally with you. They are of the world, right? That for me is clear. Nonetheless, I think that what I see when I talk to people, or when I follow politics or read a newspaper, etc., I see this process going on all the time, that nets are being thrown, that people try to separate what they deem of value and what can be thrown away, what should remain and what can left aside. So the working of the net is going on, and I'm as an anthropologist, I am interested in that, and I'm not very familiar with the discussion on the ontological turn, but I do follow the work of Bruno Latour and the actor network theory people, and I learn a lot from them in the way they question the way we've tried to understand the world, and privileging human beings probably too much, and etc., etc. And yet I also feel that, yes, but I'm studying human beings who are constantly putting labels, categorizing, saying this is this and that is that, and the two should be kept apart and different. Boundaries are constantly in the making, and I want to pay attention to that, because look at present day politics. It's all about boundary making, about fixing identities, etc., etc. And then to say that this is like only going on at the surface, and that at a deeper level, this is probably not there. For me, that is unsatisfactory. And I think Knots and Holes sort of exactly tries to highlight that tension. Huh? Here we have this world that is indifferent to our human attempts to signify it. It's not dependent on our attempts to signify it, and yet we human beings need it, huh? As we have no other option than to keep on signifying. That is our mode of survival requires this, if you want. Mm-hmm. The last thing that you brought up is a very difficult question. How do you make a film like this? I have to say that I in the field, I'm very intuitive. I basically have things that interest me, and I walk around with a little camera in my bag all the time. So for years, I've been up to a point that it drove me crazy. I've been just watching nets and net-like structures everywhere, and I saw them everywhere. So I was just producing a huge archive of all kinds of net-like.
So you were doing field work about nets?
Yes, I was very interested in basically in issues of permeability, of the permeable boundary, the boundary which keeps some things in and let other things go through. Those were like very large sort of issues that I was interested in. I was interested in the permeable body because I study spirit possession. So the body concept is a completely different one, because this body cannot be a closed container, but needs to spirits come in and out. So the conception of the body is quite different. And then basically when I come home, that's basically where I start to think, okay, what do these images that I've been collecting and making, what do they tell me? What issues do they bring up? And I think that is very much in a sort of an ongoing dialogue with the material. So it's not at all that I have a story already present when I'm filming. It is basically, it is in the editing basically that I start to think, okay, what is it that this archive that I've produced, what is it telling me? And then you try to connect all these. Although I think this film, it's really like little vignettes, right? I mean, they're very loosely connected. I think the structure of the film in the end, it moves from the more straightforward nets, which are the fishing nets, which are a weapon, which are of the hunters, which are a male figure, to the lace, which is the female version of the net, if you want, or at least that is how I wanted to look at it. But then the ladies of the village, as I say in the film, they destroyed my fantasy, and this is not what it is about.
Okay, thank you
a lot.
both, Elisenda and Mattijs. It is impossible to translate the whole
No,
dialogue
sorry,
that you've had. Don't worry about this. I'm going to summarize it in 3 minutes, and please, Elisenda, let me know if I do it wrongly. No, només volia dir que el Mattijs doncs, ha comentat que estava d'acord amb un apunt de l'Elisenda en relació a la consubstancialitat, la interrelació entre la imatge i el text, que el text implica imatge, la imatge està connectada amb el text, que no hi ha un contrast, una separació forta entre tots dos, però sí que és veritat que ell té interès en aquesta idea de les tensions, de la copresència entre imatges, textos i veus. És a dir, en tot cas, buscar unes relacions entre imatge i text que no són les relacions habituals. En relació al gir ontològic, l'ontological turn, bé, és una perspectiva, és una corrent teòrica que ha tingut, evidentment, doncs, molta importància, en la qual és difícil per ell dialogar-hi, però sí que, per exemple, en aquesta pel·lícula hi ha una línia que es pot, diguéssim, relacionar amb aquesta tendència, que és aquesta idea de que la pel·lícula que està fent ara es vincula molt més amb aquesta tendència en el sentit que mostra el cos com un cos que està fora, que està donat al món. De fet, el gir ontològic afirma aquesta idea de que no tenim un món allà fora sobre el qual nosaltres versem unes representacions, sinó que el món i la forma en què nosaltres tenim de pensar-lo, d'evitar-lo, formen una i una única cosa, i aquesta és precisament una idea que ell està desenvolupant en el seu film actual que està fent sobre el cos, un cos obert, un cos que està en el món, un cos per on passen coses, un cos que no està tancat en si mateix. Això també es pot dir sobre les xarxes. Les xarxes, diguéssim, capturen el món, però les xarxes també estan en el món i són part del món mateix, d'acord? El món, com les xarxes que estan al món, el món ja està en si mateix categoritzat i els propis conceptes que utilitzem formen part d'aquest món el que nosaltres volem estudiar. Finalment, com fa una pel·lícula? Bé, diu que en el treball de camp és molt intuïtiu, porta sempre una petita càmera, durant un cert temps anava caminant amb l'obsessió d'anar filmant totes les xarxes que veia per aquí i per allà, perquè estava interessat en aquesta qüestió de la impermeabilitat, allò del deixar passar. I a partir d'aquí va anar filmant, però evidentment la construcció de la pel·lícula, que són com tota una sèrie de fragments, de vinyetes interconnectades entre si, apareix sobretot en el moment del llenguatge. Del muntatge, the editing. I just wanted to say a word when this idea that the theories that we make on the world become part of the world itself, and that we are somehow the heirs of the previous theories that inhabit us, and that we are part of them. They are somehow the net in which we are trapped. And this is why I find so funny and interesting the sequence on the visit of Judith Butler, the thing that this thought-provoking attempt by Judith Butler to understand the world provokes the world and changes it. So we are always in what has been called the ethnographic interface. We are always in the net, and what we do transforms the world we are talking to, and we have to be aware of this. And your film is very transparent and very critical in this regard, because you appear yourself as a filmmaker in the very strong sense of the word. You make a film, and making of films implies making the world on what the film is about. So we are all cut into the web, but at least as anthropologists, what we can do is to step back, and somehow you step back and to spark this idea of, okay, I have a world before me, and this is not just a given thing. I mean, this is not obvious. Is this the word by Levinas is this is not obvious, this is like this, but it might be different as well. As a film, that you've made this film, but you could have done another one. Infinito's one. And this is this possibility again.
Yeah, and that really also requires that you. So I'm quite radical in almost the theater technique of Bertolt Brecht, no? That you
definitely.
That you sort of constantly break out of the film to keep an audience alert that this is a film being made, that this is what we're looking at. I'm constructing an argument. I'm making a film. So that's why I do have all these decisions that I cut. As you have seen, the frame has been cut from the top and the bottom, and many filmmakers were even angry with me, saying, why do you do that? But I just want that sort of nuisance to be there. I want the frame. I don't want to seduce people by saying, now sit back, relax, and we'll tell it.
La belle image.
Yeah, we go to Bahia. No, you go to a screen where images are being projected and sound is being. That is really what and that is indeed a kind of a transparency which I also had to bring in regarding my own person, because in the end it became a much more personal film than I had contemplated. Again, in the editing room, in that isolation of the editing room, where you're not still thinking, oh, this thing is at some point going out into the world, you just let your thoughts drift. And for me, always, when I want to understand the dynamics of nets and what they do and how they work, then I always take myself to be the first guinea pig, my own life. I want to see how does that play itself out in my own being, in my own life, and then I bring in my own personhood, my own sexuality is in there. Because I really, and that for me, like, that's still one of the riddles. There are the net stockings, and there are all these other erotic dimensions of nets. And still, if you were to ask me now, how is it that nets eroticize? What is it erotic about them? Why is this sort of exciting if women or even men put on net stockings, and how does that excite us? That's still, for me, that is something I've been trying to research, but if anyone in the audience has a clear thought on this, I would love to hear it.
There is an erotics on nets, as there is an erotics on theory as well.
On
theory.
Right.
Josep, no sé si vols, ja som gairebé 3:45.
I have a very quickly question. First, I have to apologize for my bad English if I am not understood. I hope that Roger will help me. But my question, my very quickly question is, when you can consider that the anthropological theory is taking part of an ethnographical film. If I think about the reflexive work of classical filmmakers like Agnès Bartha in Les Glanères del Ganet, I don't know. This is my question. How can a viewer recognize the theoretical background in a film? This is my question.
How can they recognize it? So I find it hard to answer the question, because I think it so much depends on what kind of an audience do we have. I think if this film screens for anthropologists, I think it's quite obvious. The attempt, the film also starts with the immediate problematic thing that I walk around and I tell people I make a film on fishing nets, but in the back of my mind I know, no, I'm interested in theory, right? But So I think anthropologists will plug into that. For a non-anthropological audience, I don't know if they should take out theory, but I would hope that they find a space which provokes them to think, which provokes them to establish new connections between things they did not think about before, I guess. And if they call that theory or not, that's not so much my concern in that case. For a broader audience, I can immediately say that the film did not well beyond ethnographical film festivals. So maybe that is already a telling sign that it speaks more to the project of anthropologists than to a general audience.
Thank you. Josep, vols fer la traducció tu o la faig jo?
Fes-la tu.
Vale. No, diu que la pregunta del Josep era essencialment com es pot reconèixer una teoria dins una pel·lícula etnogràfica, i pensant en aquesta categoria de reconèixer, el que ha dit en Mattijs és que bé, en gran part això depèn de l'audiència, del tipus d'audiència. Evidentment, una audiència antropològica reconeixerà des de ben inici una sèrie de referències, entendrà aquesta pregunta de estic investigant sobre les xarxes, però en el fons el que vull és investigar sobre l'estatus de la teoria. Una altra cosa és en una audiència, en un públic molt més ampli, en què potser aquesta qüestió, diguéssim, de la teoria i de l'antropologia no serà reconeguda, però això tampoc és tan important. Al cap i a la fi, en aquest cas, el que es tractaria és que aquest públic, la pel·lícula, el que fes és suscitar-li preguntes, suscitar-li qüestions i interrogar-se el que la pel·lícula planteja, no?
Gràcies, Roger. Passem a VENTO quan digueu.
Yes, we are running out late, so if there are no more comments, we are going to watch a very short film of 4 minutes, VENTO, and then we will say goodbye to everyone. And so I see you in 4 or 5 minutes to close the session. Thank you very much again. Giuseppe is going to share his screen to see this short film. I don't know if Mattijs, you want to say just a line about VENTO?
This was basically one of the very first tryouts with my footage. You will even see some of the footage that was in the film is also in this little video. It's a song by Dorival Caymmi, VENTO, which talks about how the wind puts everything in motion. But VENTO is also, I think, a reference to the world of spirits and Afro-Brazilian religion.
Okay, thank you very much. El vent, que és aquesta pel·lícula, veureu algunes de les escenes que heu vist a la pel·lícula en el llargmetratge, el vent, que és això que passa per tot arreu, que no pot ser captat, però al mateix temps que fa referència als esperits que posseixen els cossos. Està inspirada en una cançó. Who's the author of the song again, please?
Dorival Caymmi.
Thank you very much.
You will hear him sing. He sings it also.
Great, great. Endavant, Josep. Molt bé. Doncs crec que aquesta ha estat una manera meravellosa i molt bonica de tancar aquesta sessió. espero que a tots i a totes us hagi interessat. Jo penso que ha estat una sessió fantàstica i que tots ens quedem amb les ganes de veure més treballs del Mattijs i especialment aquesta peça en la qual està treballant en aquest moment i que seria bonic que en el futur vingués aquí a Barcelona i ens ensenyés aquesta pel·lícula en la qual ara està treballant i que el poguéssim tenir aquí i que en poguéssim parlar directament. Mattijs, I was saying, I think that you understood,
Understood.
Your first Catalan course ever, but...
It's going well, I have to say.
Yeah, okay, that's fantastic.
Can I also ask, thank you so much for having me, and especially, I wrote down his name, Paul Gallard, for translating everything in Catalan. I think he did such a great job. It's such a lot of work, so all my thanks go to him. And I would also like to say that the film Knots and Holes will very soon, like next week or the week after, will be published in an online journal. It's called Entanglements, and there it's an open access journal. Everyone can go see it, and there are also some texts around it. And so I thought it was nice to for people who want to go back or tell others to watch the film that is the possibility that is coming up.
Ja ho he entès, diu que la pel·lícula aquesta serà disponible en una revista online que es diu Entanglements, conjuntament amb una sèrie de textos i que, per tant, ja a partir de la setmana que ve, si voleu, la podreu tornar a veure i transmet les seves gràcies al Pol Gallard, que ha fet la traducció al català i que ha fet un treball fantàstic. Well, we always hope to have you here for your next film and to have a public screening in Barcelona. So,
for it. Yeah.
Okay, so see you very soon.
This coronavirus, and then we'll...
Definitely, we always hope that. So thank you very much, see you very soon. Gràcies a tots i a totes, ens veiem properament. Adéu, Josep.
Bye-bye.